I'm Ruth Catlow, I'm from Furtherfield, and I've stuck this image up because I'm an artist and trained as a sculptor, and my first encounter with the internet just changed the whole way I felt about being an artist and what being an artist meant in the world. And this was in about 1996 in London's first cyber cafe, or at least London's first art cyber cafe, which was Backspace down in London Bridge. And this is a network image we created for a project that's been kind of running since 2007 called DIWO. So don't just do it yourself, do it with others. And it's acknowledging that the network contains many multiply connected different kinds of things. So tools, processes, symbols, ways of making images, ways of keeping things secure, code, as well as feelings and attitudes. So here we have, I always think of this as Nam June Paik, artist philosopher, and the hysteric. So we have this kind of a network that's really alive, and because these things can all connect in very many different ways and are free to kind of exchange, this is our kind of living medium, really, as artists. The other thing that the network does is encourage collaboration, or at least encourage some collaboration is a kind of very wide term, and we're all going to discover and think about that more today, so I'm not going to attempt a kind of a definition or a kind of summary. But there are many good reasons to collaborate in art and technology, and many things can go wrong, and I think sometimes it's more fun thinking about the things that can go wrong than all the brilliant things that can happen. So I'm going to start with things that can go wrong, and just give some examples and think about some of the ways that we've thought about kind of meeting these challenges. The first thing that can go wrong is that you and your collaborators, you don't know what you want and you don't know who you are. So, and of course, to some degree, we know what we want and who we are, but knowing more about who we are and what we want is likely to lead us to better and more successful forms of collaboration. Now, I think it's worth being clear. I'm talking about collaborations that last more than 2 days, and maybe less than 3 years. Okay, so that's the kind of time scale that I'm talking about. This is the experience that I'm drawing on when I talk about this. I'm not talking about things like the kind of recent emergence of things like hack days, things that happen very fast. I'm talking about things where you're going to work with someone who you're going to want to continue to work with for a while. So we don't know who we are. So I'm going to start both by telling you who I am and by demonstrating the ways in which you might tell people about who you are. Okay. I'm with Furtherfield. We're an organisation for arts, technology and social change that's been running since 1997. I set it up with Mark, who is now my husband, and it's been a great life adventure so far. And it really happened when we first encountered the internet. He was from a pirate radio background and a kind of street art activist background. And we came together as Brit art was having what felt to us like a fairly kind of horrid effect on what it felt like to be an artist. So there was this kind of closing down, the plucking out of a few celebrities, and a general sense of contempt for the audience. And all of those things made us feel uncomfortable and unhappy. And the internet was a place that was, in those early days, it was a place that you could build. So you were building your own space, you could publish it and you could share it with whoever else was adventurously exploring what it might be. So it was a context that you could make yourself. One of the things we do is write artist statements and mission statements. And this is, so if the question is, what is art and technology good for? Why do we care about it and what are we using it for? This is our answer to it at the moment. So we think it's good for the enlargement and evolution of diverse human freedoms, expression, imagination and exchange. And it's important for the future sustainability and resilience of the species. Now, what you can't do is go up to someone and say, this is what I'm all about. This is a kind of But this is a kind of crystallisation of kind of thinking about what scale of thing we're interested in and what the context is but you can't really do that, or at least you can't only do that. So you have to show people where you are, the things you're doing, all of these kinds of things. So we run a public gallery in the heart of Finsbury Park. And again, the kind of images you share about the person you are important as well. This, I hope, gives a sense of a space that is welcoming and open to many people, and that's a really kind of core part of our ethos. We run a online community since '97 which is built for and by artists, techies and activists. So it's this kind of crossover of groups of people. And we have lab spaces in London. We've run lab spaces in London since 2004 for really kind of very experimental, often quite informal experimental processes for art and technologies, and these take many forms. And again, if you look at the images, I'm trying to convey a kind of sense of the range and diversity of people that we work with. So images are really important in talking about who you are and what you're doing, and it can convey a lot of things very quickly. Okay, the other thing that can go wrong is that you disagree about your starting point, about what are the things that are affecting you, about the materials you're working with, and about what are the important things about your context. So again, this is an impossible list, I understand that, but I think that especially this top lot of things, for us, I don't think we can work with people who don't agree with us that this is part of the current situation. So we are in economic crisis, we are in environmental crisis, and we're all, whether we think about it, participating in a networked revolution. We're experimenting with these technologies and cultures, which in a way that's accelerating behaviour change, the behaviour change of us all, and we don't know what it's going to do, we don't know what effect it's going to have. It's massive. And then there are all these other things along here which kind of obsess me and the people I work with, which are to do with how natural and digital resources are opening up and closing down and all of these kinds of things. And then just at the bottom, we're in a cold studio in Bermondsey. I mean, we're not, but it's important to know actually where you're standing as well. Yes, you can forget about who your work is for. Because working across art and technology is so fascinating and so stimulating, you can find, especially in early stages of projects, that you end up completely engrossed in the conversation and in the pleasure of finding out new things and discovering new things together, and forgetting that it's actually, you're making something that is for other people or that is for a purpose. And I'm going to tell you a cautionary tale. In 2006, I'm not going to name this project because it's a bit kind of like airing dirty linen in public, this, but some of you might know what I'm talking about. We were working on a festival in London. It was a 40-venue festival for new media arts across really big institutions and people working in sheds in Deptford, you know, so across a wide range of people. And we were working with artists, activists and technologists, and we decided that we were going to produce a website and a database. It was working with a new way of working with databases that was going to allow us to use a kind of tag. Those of you who are engineers are going to start to cringe now because I'm going to start to slightly misdescribe things. But what we were attempting to do was to create a database that would allow us to link from artworks, art forms, events, venues, talks, workshops, art forms, venues, all of these kinds of things. So you'd be able to link, you'd be able to kind of follow a trail. And so we thought we were going to get a website. We were working very closely. We saw some visuals about how it was going to work. The festival worked in two halves. The first one was a kind of conference, data gathering people together, finding out what their interest was. The second one was the kind of art festival. Okay, so we were at the first day of the conference. We're there with our techie, and we have an interface. Okay, so we want an interface that is going to enable us to gather information from people as they come in, We're going to be able to say what kind of art form they work with, what organisation they're from, what venue they're at, that kind of thing. And what we get is that, which is essentially a text field. And the techie says, well, you just have to search it. And I'm thinking, oh my God. So I go in and I search art, and it returns it returns nothing. I type in technology, it returns nothing. I type in venue, it returns nothing. And she said, well, no, actually, what you have to type in blah, blah, blah. So I have to know what I have to type in before I can search for it. And once I'm in there, I can start to, but we kind of, there are a lot of people involved in this kind of burning resentment started to build up amongst us that we'd all work really hard to make something good. And at the end of the day, the group who saw themselves as techies were saying, well, if you want a shiny white cube website, you should just have gone to a normal web designer, shouldn't you? And so, bear that in mind, okay. The same words mean different things in different disciplines. I was talking to Rachel about this yesterday. Versioning was the example Rachel gave. A version means different things to engineers than it does to people who are not engineers. And you can find yourself becoming very irritated with people if you've been having a conversation about something for 3 days and then suddenly you discover actually you were talking about something else. And this was an image I put together to talk about, actually we were talking about openness because this is one of the themes of the aforementioned festival. And openness was so it was a core theme. We were working with artists and techies and activists, and we discovered that openness meant something very different. Free means something very different as well across art and technology. And very often, so open and free means something which is very precise and quite technical in engineering, and it's very useful to be technical and precise. But what's not useful is if you assume that you mean the same thing. It doesn't only mean emancipatory and collaborative. You know, it means something very precise. Code is not clay. When I was working on this presentation this morning, this was the last slide I put in, and then suddenly I thought, oh God, that really should have been everything that I was talking about today. Because I think if we're talking about artists and scientists or technologists working together, where we get really stuck often is that artists, and I don't make the mistake of thinking that artists and techies aren't always the same thing. These things can combine in somebody, and often a lot of us are very hybrid. But that the process of putting a piece of software together or a program together is a very different process to shaping a piece of matter. And your whole relationship to planning, process, when you can change your mind there are big differences about when you can change your mind between whether you're working as an artist or an engineer. And these can be real sources of tension. Collaboration can be really slow because it's a little bit like you've got two halves of your brain, and an awful lot of work has to go on between making these two halves of your brain work together and talk to each other. Okay, so I'll finish with some things that make collaboration work. You do need to trust each other, which comes back to knowing each other and really knowing as much as you can and being curious. What you see a lot is artists saying, I really don't know how to use a computer. I don't understand all that stuff. And that's just not good enough. It's really, really not good enough. And it's not good enough either for engineers and techies to say, oh, well, they're a bit, it's all a bit, it's just about making things pretty, or that's not good enough either. You have to be curious, and you have to expect to respect each other, because they're both really important processes. They both have long cultures that really give they shape our world. So you have to pay attention to them. Okay, and now I'm now turning into teacher, so forgive me, and it's nearly finished. Create your brief together. create your brief together and do it really, really carefully. Make sure there's nothing in it that you don't understand. There will always be things in it that you don't understand, and then commit to it as if your life depends on it. So don't allow a brief to be agreed until you really know what it says in that brief and you're really sure that you have a shared understanding. Distinguish between the things that are nice to have and necessities, and understand what you all need to get out of it. And it might be from the very kind of daily kind of prosaic, pragmatic things like money. It might need to happen in a certain amount of time. You might need to get, it might be about reputation, it might be about who's getting credit for what. All of those things are really important. And plan for cycles of development. Testing, review, revisions, and plan to go around that a lot. Communicate the changing schedule to everyone. That takes a really long time. The schedules will change because you don't know, especially in technical processes, I have discovered, you don't know how long things are going to take. So you're having to constantly kind of make decisions about where you're going to let things go and what's important, and you have to keep people in the loop. I've repeated myself, and then have as much fun as possible. Very, very important. So really just kind of remember to enjoy it. Otherwise it's just really stressful. And I'm going to end up now, if I've got 2 minutes, just with some examples of things. Okay, sometimes with a lot of the projects that we've done at Furtherfield, the projects have been about technology. And I think there's this continuum which is where artists and technologists might work to actually just understand what technical culture is and how it's changing us. And this is an example of this. So this is Kay's blog by an Essex artist called Liz Sterry. She followed a Canadian teenager, her blog, for 3 months without telling her, 18-year-old, and she broke no laws. She didn't do anything really creepy. She downloaded lots of photographs from Kay's blog, and she followed where she went to work, what friends she met, took note of the things that she was obsessed with, and then she built a replica of her bedroom. And we're currently touring the replica of Kay's blog. So this is called Kay. We're currently touring this around the country. So now there is this kind of window into this teenager's life. And so a lot of it is making things that are kind of physical embodiments of kind of metaphors and analogies for how technology is changing our relationship with each other. This is a work that we commissioned for our gallery when we first opened in the park, called London Wall, N4. And this is artists who are working with technology, but they're working with existing things. They're not doing technically very complex things. They scraped Twitter feeds on a postcode around the gallery, looked for tweets that were interesting, turned them into posters, and then made this very beautiful wall of bill posters of essentially the kind of mutterings and murmurings of the people in this area. And why we commissioned it was that we wanted people who stepped into our gallery to see themselves reflected, to see their own concerns and ideas reflected. So it becomes a way of people seeing what they're putting out there, seeing who they are in relation to each other, and seeing how technology is allowing us to do this in a very concrete way. I'm not going to talk about this one because it's quite complicated to explain, but I will tell you to go and have a look at it. Iacozzi created this piece called A Crowded Apocalypse, which crowdsourced paranoia, using essentially a mechanical Turk. Go and have a look at it. But the outcome of this incredible process was 72 images of people around the world protesting fake concerns. And it gives us a kind of image of the web. And finally, I put this, so this is a project that I've been developing with Soda, who are a company who do playful technologies. It's called Play Your Place. I've been developing it also with an American game artist called Mary Flanagan. And it's an open online artwork which takes the form of a multi-level platform game. It's a game building game for people to shape the future of their place through play. So basically they draw, make and play the future of their town in the form of a platform game. And I put this one in because this is a project that has come really, it's being led by artists, but it's involved a really long process of collaboration with a really fab tech team actually. But a lot of the kind of things to look out for that I've just shared with you came from kind of really having to bash things out and suffering quite a lot when we hadn't thought of things about that arose from working between artists and technologists. And I think that's it. Yes. Thank you.